Hello and welcome to Ron Whitlock Reports. What does the border wall mean to the United States and Mexico? What is globalization all about? What's happening with the declining amount of people who are considered to be the middle class in the United States, yet we have an emerging middle class in the neighboring country of Mexico? To add a little bit of conversation to this and maybe open your eyes a little bit, we have with us Blaine Mcclain. Blaine has written an undergrad thesis, University of Texas Permian Basin, for his degree there. And Blaine, we want you to explain to the audience a little bit, what about this situation of the emerging globalization and why it seems to be having such a major impact on the middle class, especially in our country where the middle class is in a decline, where in Mexico it's in an increase?
Well, for one, when we define the middle class, we look at the disparity in between the impoverished and the wealthy citizens of that nation, right? And from the standpoint of the United States, we have increased our disparity from like 400 to 1 when it comes to the wealthy. And the impoverished rate in Mexico is something like 1 in 30. So when it comes to displaying where the money is being allocated, we can then assess whether or not those people have free enterprise or fairness within their economy.
So to compare the two United States on this side, Mexico on the other side, what is happening with this globalized economy, with these major corporations, some having more wealth than even nations themselves, on one side, and we here looking that we think we're the biggest economy, yet Mexico is supposed to be the next Germany, on par with Germany within the next decade. So what's going on there? We're a shrinking middle class. Mexico is an emerging middle class. And what should we be concerned about at this point?
Well, it's a question of liberty. Mexico has more liberty when it comes to freeing its dollar than the United States has, even though there is more violence going on there. Just like in our industrial revolution, there was a great deal of violence. And these individuals were able to establish their businesses and establish fear for their businesses, which allowed them to grow. Mexico has the ability to establish fear. Now we have already became fearful of our corporations, which is why we pay the same thing as a mobster's extortion tax, except we pay that tax to the U.S. government, and it is given back as corporate subsidies.
And these major globalized economies, globalized countries, companies that have become more powerful than countries, they are taking away our liberties?
Because of taxation.
And because their ability through lobbyists, they're paid lobbyists, to enforce and affect policy.
Exactly. When it comes to enforcing policy, if you have a policy that goes contrary to the freedom of the American people, you are not allowing the American people to be free, to have liberty over their dollar. So rather than having their own civic duty in mind for caring for their neighbor, they begin to become callous because they already believe that the government is ready to step up when it comes to caring for their neighbor. So not only have we allowed corporations to rob us of our liberties, but we have effectually become callous towards our neighbors and build walls.
So we become pawns.
Yes, we have. Unless you have a great deal of capital in this nation.
Now, Blaine, how have we become pawns, and how can we try to quit being pawns if that in fact is correct and we are pawns?
Well, first we have to take off this veil of fear that is over our eyes. When we allow people to distort the way that we view things and keep us from achieving our own personal happiness, we have already robbed ourselves. So we don't even have to give the credit to the government from robbing from ourselves.
So we pawns, let's say middle class pawns,
Middle class pawns.
shrinking middle class in the United States, emerging middle class in Mexico. Why have the middle class pawns, your term, not mine,
Okay.
that audience trying to determine whether they're pawn or not. We're going to help them figure that out or not.
Okay.
So they have become pawns of these globalized companies. How we let that happen, assuming that's correct?
How did we let that happen?
By failing to communicate? All politics is local, Blaine. Supposed to be.
It is supposed to be local. A part of failing to communicate is by allocating our social powers away from ourselves. We allow our television sets to dictate what we think, and that's not right.
We're letting the talking heads, the Rush Limbaughs, the Alex Joneses, those people with catastrophizing the situation and making us believe it's going to become true unless we follow them as the Pied Piper.
Exactly, and it creates unnecessary social anxiety, and that social anxiety is necessary to extort us out of our dollars.
And that social anxiety ends up in paralysis and the fact that we go to and vote for the incumbent rather than for the independent.
Now, the reason why we vote for the incumbent isn't just because they our fear tells us that we need to vote for the incumbent. We vote for the incumbent because
Status quo.
they
You
have
think the
the
status quo is
established
all
power.
right? Because the catastrophizers are telling us, the talking heads, it's going to be worse unless the status quo is retained. So it makes us believe in the status quo.
And you feed into that power instead of taking the power for yourselves. How many people actually go out and find their own business or do that thing that they want to do because they are fearful that the economy might collapse in the next 6 months, that they won't have the money to go out and venture into new opportunities because that could mean the end of their way of life?
Well, our economists tell us that the core of our economy is small business.
It is.
The core of our economy in the United States is small business. Yet we're accepting the fact that that cannot continue because these globalized economies are going to be the face of the future and our survival. Is that wrong?
Well, it's beneficial for us to have large corporations in our nation. And when it comes...
But they need to employ, these globalized companies need to employ small business. Yes?
Exactly, but at the same time, we aren't allowing ourselves to place the right tariffs to ensure that they feed into these small businesses.
Now, Blaine, when I grew up in a small town in South Texas, we had our own little ice cream manufacturer. We had our own dairy, we had our own farms, we had our own little bank, we had our own person who sold us eggs. These were all small little companies serving that little nucleus of the small town where I grew up. Now we have big giant egg companies. We have one poultry company for the entire country, and we have all these small little companies have gone away, and we've all become servants to these major multinational corporations. Is that our fault, or is that do we need to try to go against the grain and empower again small business and the middle class?
Now, hardlining yourself is a great philosophy to adopt when you want to establish something for yourselves. But it isn't wrong for people to enjoy the freedom of options. And that's what America has, is a freedom of options. Now, it's up to us to pursue those options.
Good point. We're going to pick up that in a moment. And maybe how does Mexico fit into the United States, maybe as one economy, U.S. and Mexico. We'll talk about that when we continue here on Ron Whitlock Report, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Ron Whitlock Reports. When we went to the break with our conversation with Blaine Mcclain, we were talking about the fact that these globalized economies somewhat are causing the middle class to shrink in the United States, even though Mexico's middle class economy is increasing. So, does this mean we're going to have to start voting again? We're going to pay attention more to who wants our vote and elect people who will represent us rather than the party?
Well, I believe that we should always vote for people whom we are actually able to communicate with instead of blindly voting for an image. Today, we like to feed into this Hollywood notion of politics, where we want the good-looking one, the person with the right education, the right name recognition, rather than the person who will do the right thing for us.
Well, they say that Abraham Lincoln had a real high-pitched voice, and yet probably one of the more prominent presidents the United States has ever had historically. If he ran in today's media political circumstance, he would never have been elected because of his high-pitched voice. He was not a very handsome person. Is that your point?
It has more to do with our own local leaders. When we have people like Eisenhower, who has stepped up and has proven themselves to the nation, we are more likely to vote for them because of that name recognition. But now we have people who go off and make characters of themselves on national television, and after making a name for themselves as a character, run for a public office just for the attention.
Having not really shown leadership skills, having not shown the ability to run a business, or the experience quotient is void. It's just all name recognition and something that's been created by the meisters of Ronald McDonald.
Well, experience is one thing, but the heart of the individual is another. An individual can have all the experience in the world, but if they don't have the heart to serve the people, they're not going to serve the people.
Going back now to our premise, shrinking middle class in the United States, increasing middle class in Mexico to the point that in a decade, economists are telling us Mexico's economy will be on par with Germany. Yeah, our economy, middle class-wise, is shrinking. Job creation has not responded since 2008. In reality, what's going on here, Blaine?
Right now, we're going through a period of construction within our economy, where we are allowing ourselves to create a concrete foundation for us to grow in. Right now, Mexico doesn't have that concrete foundation to grow. So even though they seem to be growing at a much faster rate than the United States, does not mean that they aren't going to implode anytime soon.
So the internationalization of the Mexican petroleum economy, bringing in help for Pemex to get those resources out of the ground, by maquiladoras with the United States and Mexico, the NAFTA and CAFTA, the emerging economy of the U.S. and Mexico coming more together. What impact is that going to have on the shrinking U.S. middle class and the emerging middle class in Mexico?
It'll create more opportunities for small business owners who have an interest in having a dual nation business and allowing themselves to become a import-export service maker at some extent or another. When you have someone who has the expertise in managing a business, that expertise does not go away. So they will eventually end up where the money is supposed to be and take the money from the table.
So small business people, somebody watching this program telecast, and they say, I could do that. I could create a widget that I can sell to international companies and to individuals, and therefore I can be a survivor in this global economy rather than a servant of this globalized economy.
Well, we're all going to survive this global economy.
One way or the other.
One way or the other. And it is in our best interest in a globalized economy to be servants of one another. If you don't provide a service, then what good are you?
It goes back to the basis that everybody understood created anything of worth. Find a need and serve it.
Exactly.
Find a need and fill it. Find a need that people have and fill that need. If they use your toothpaste every day, your toothbrush every day, you're going to have provided a service and you're going to create wealth.
Exactly. Now selling faulty.
Keep your eyes open. Read the paper, think, pray.
And communicate.
And communicate. And that's the topic of our next segment, communicate. We must communicate, according to Blaine. We're going to talk to him more about that when this program continues, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Ron Whitlock Reports with Blaine Mcclain. Now, Blaine talks about in his undergraduate thesis that he wrote, get his degree from UT Permian Basin in Odessa, Texas. He writes that we compensate our lack of competency in our leaders by communication. Communication is the biggest factor in establishing stability in our community. It's not the size of your opponent, but it's how you, through in years to come up with economic stability, determine how we react and how we communicate those needs. What does that all mean, Blaine?
Well, to go back into that word react, how you react to the situations that come upon you tells a lot about your character.
Whether it's with emotion or by design, with using data and research.
Well, to react using empirical research is always preferable, but some of us don't have the empirical research in front of us to make the right decision. I'm not sure if you've ever played Tower Solitaire before. Have you ever played Tower Solitaire
Never have,
before?
no.
You've got a time
The word
limit.
solitaire is an anathema to this reporter.
But you've played solitaire before. It's almost the same, but you have to constantly be moving the cards. And if you don't move the cards fast enough, you can't clear the towers. If you can't clear the towers, you're not going to get as many points as you should, and you're not going to be able to move to the next round. And you won't get that coin. You want to get that coin, because that's in your best interest. So in order to make the right decisions that we need to make, we have to talk to one another. We have to see what cards are on the table. Now, part of our problem is most of us don't make enough money to see the actual cards on the table when it comes to economic policies, when it comes to civil policies such as FCC communication reports. Not all of us know exactly where to look. So what do? We talk to one another. We put the information down for those whom we can't call to so that they can inform themselves. Information is key to surviving. And to end that anxiety, you have to go out and you have to inform yourself.
So just because you have a good idea for a new widget or a new cookie or a new toothpaste or whatever it might be, or a new cola, you need to have some kind of a core focus group. You need to do some research. You need to get out and find out what's going on. Why your competitor, you're going to compete with somebody because somebody's got that product out there already. Must do some kind of legwork to make it happen, some kind of homework.
Homework helps, but sometimes homework isn't the only thing that you need. Sometimes the thing that you need to do is just get yourself out there and establish who you are. Otherwise, the rest won't matter.
We'll react to that, more conversation in that regard when we return, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Ron Whitlock Reports, talking to Blaine Mcclain. And Blaine just came out of University of Texas Permian Basin with some great ideas. He came from South Texas historically, which understands with the creation of border walls and restriction of legitimate trade and travel, creation of things that caused an economy which had been vibrant into itself. It was separated by the Rio Grande River after 9/11. What's going to cause this community in particular on the border region, northern Mexico, southern United States, used to be vibrant, now it's divided. It's in somewhat of a decline because of the fact that 9/11 caused by Al-Qaeda caused us to separate ourselves one to another. Is Twitter, social media got any involvement in this, or is television, radio, the old style media still have a future?
Okay, I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. And this isn't very well known, but Twitter and Facebook have a lot to do with communicating. But the real problem is the ego of our local leaders. The problem with our local leaders is they have allowed their own pride to get in the way of establishing a relationship with the other leaders so that they can create core methods, establish methods in which they themselves could communicate and allow such things as service workers to intermingle among each other. If we had a catastrophe in Brownsville, we don't have the right EMS workers to act in a fashion needed to rescue the victims of whatever terrorist attack. We don't have the right resources because we don't have the money coming in. Why don't we have the right resources coming in? Because we don't have enough trade coming down here as much as we would have liked. But there is a trade in Mexico. So if we were able to establish either a treaty or a social pact that would allow members of both nations to continue to circulate the dollars within, because the communities outside of our border in Mexico have also been impacted. The people doing well in Mexico are those who are in the southern regions of Mexico, not the people in Tamaulipas right now.
That is because of the separation of the society that occurred after 9/11 to a big degree?
I do believe that 9/11 has hurt our economy, but I don't believe that it has hurt our economy in the way that we all think. I think the problem is that we are too tightly grasping our coin purses, if you will. We want to hold on to as much money as we can.
Because of fear.
If you look at the escalation of violence in Mexico and our own problems, it happened almost simultaneously when the housing bubble burst. Now, how can we restore ourselves back into the trade that we used to have back in the 90s? Well, when it comes to the U.S. or Mexico's policies, it really hasn't affected us here in the border. Because we are a dual nation valley, we have the ability to almost feed in within ourselves, because we have two great nations that pull apart. When Mexico does well, the valley does well. When the U.S. does well, the border towns along Mexico does well as well. So if we could establish conferences within our local leaders, that would help us a lot.
So, what's the answer?
The answer is
An international conference of getting people from northern Mexico and the United States all to sit down at a town hall meeting and talk about the issues, and do that on a regular basis from here to California?
Doing it on a regular basis would help a lot. Now, having just one town hall meeting doesn't help at all.
No.
But if you could allow these local leaders to meet with each other through conferences frequently, they could establish a better rapport among themselves. And from the establishment of a better rapport, they would be more willing to do the right things necessary to allow themselves to grow.
And as a fresh graduate, UT Permian Basin, what should be the name of these ongoing conferences that puts this vibrant economy back together again from Brownsville all the way to San Diego?
Well, I would say just call it the Rio Grande Conference.
The Rio Grande Conference, Brownsville to San Diego, both sides of the border. Dos países, México los Estados Unidos, bicultural, bilingual, binational. Exactly. One community, and it can spread from the Rio Grande all the way out to California, north to Canada, all the way to Central America.
Yes, sir. After all, the Rio Grande was a man-made river. Why can't we make a conference to allow us to increase our trade and export the same way that this river has increased our trade and export?
And so, the answer to this would be the emerging Mexican economy and the middle class now increasing, the shrinking U.S. economy, middle class. Maybe they would be equalized and both countries could do better.
Yes, sir.
Is that it? Blaine, we hope you've explained something to the audience and you have interacted with us. Whatever you think, let us hear from you, and feedback at ronwhitlockreports.com. If you want to communicate with Blaine Mcclain, you can do the same here in feedback, ronwhitlockreports.com. Also, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and at ronwhitlockreports.com. Till next time, adios.